Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm so excited to have you all here to talk about actionable plans for RevOps to move to a strategic role with a stellar group of panelists. And you will get to know them pretty soon. But for right now, my name is Eduardo. I am a community events manager at Modern Sales Pros, and my job today here is very easy. I just need to make sure everyone will get the most out of this panel. This event is hosted by Modern Sales Pros, and for those of you not familiar with MSP, you are 100% missing out because we are the world's largest revenue leadership community for people in sales management, sales and revenue operations, sales development, and the related supporting disciplines. Our mission is to create a great environment for our 20,000, you heard it right, 20,000 and growing members to answer questions they would struggle to solve on their own and to help them see solutions they might not know about. We do that through great live sessions like the one you're about to experience today, through our robust online forum, and in the near future, hopefully, in-person events. And if you like the content you will see here today, and I'm sure um, you will love our Revenue Excellence Summit happening in April from the 12th to the 14th. So stop missing out and get pre-registered to our summit with the link that I'm going to drop in the chat pretty soon. But for now, let's focus on how to get the most out of this session with Everstage. And I have some housekeeping notes for us. First, the event's being recorded. You'll be able to get access to the recordings and the key takeaways from the panelists and the previous events page on the MSP website, so you can always have great information handy when you most need it. And second, if you have a question for the panelists, please use the Q&A function, and we will be sure to get to them during the event. And finally, we have Everstage as a sponsor today. Thank you, Everstage, for putting this together. So I'm going to pass the mic to Siva, the co-founder and CEO of Everstage, to introduce us to the amazing work they're doing. Hey, Siva.
Thanks, Eduardo. Hey, everyone. Great to be here and glad to be speaking with the amazing panel right here. So, as Eduardo mentioned, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Everstage. Everstage is a no-code sales commission automation platform. Customers of Everstage use the platform to automate the recurring busy work typically associated with revenue operations and sales operations teams. And also to obviously provide transparency and real-time visibility of commissions and performance to sales teams. We've also set up the platform in a way to gamify the entire experience of commissions to make sure company organizations achieve their goals in driving the right performance and visibility through the incentive program. Overall, at Everstage, we're super passionate about the RevOps persona. We've grown. We have a bunch of revenue operations professionals within the team. So we're super excited to work with this community to make sure they grow and learn and have fun in this journey. So looking forward to this panel.
Thank you, Siva. That sounds amazing. We're looking forward to it too. And now I want to introduce you to our fabulous moderator for today, Natalie David. Natalie, so please introduce yourself and you can take it from here. I hope you all enjoy it, and I'll be back for a few closing notes at the end. But Natalie, it's your time to shine. Please take it from here. I'm going backstage, but I'll be watching closely. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Welcome, and I'm so excited to be here today. I'm Natalie, former EVP Revenue. For the last 12 years, I've been leading sales and go-to-market teams for US and Israeli-based B2B tech companies, and in that time, I've become a huge RevOps enthusiast. The context for our conversation today is this. The RevOps function holds incredible potential to enable go-to-market teams to bring in more revenue while also saving on operational costs. As the only role that has end-to-end context on the entire go-to-market organization, it places RevOps in a unique position to drive strategy that accelerates your business from all angles and turns your teams into money-making powerhouses. However, the reality is, a lot of your bandwidth is occupied by recurring busy work, putting out fires, jumping on ad hoc requests. Very little time or mind space is left to take up strategic initiatives that fully leverage the capabilities of the RevOps team. And so the goal of our panel discussion today is to unpack this idea of how can RevOps shift from being reactive to proactive and transition from support to strategy. To do so, we're going to hear from expert revenue operators about their own experiences and get some of their practical advice. advice. And so with that, I'd love to have the members of our panel introduce themselves. Siva, would you start and say a couple more words?
Yep, for sure. Thanks, Natalie. Obviously, as I introduced myself before, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Everstage. But more passionately, I'm a RevOps professional, and I used to run the revenue operations globally for Freshworks prior to this journey. Freshworks, as some of you might know, is a public company right now, but I was part of that journey fairly early on, from 30 million in ARR to 200 million, and build the revenue operations from scratch for the company. Obviously, lots of learnings from that journey, lots of mistakes that we made. Hopefully, some of those that we'll share today for you to, at least not make the same, but different mistakes and learn and grow in your journey. So looking forward to this.
We're so excited to have you here. Anastasia, why don't you go ahead?
Thanks, Natalie. Hi, everyone. I am in the UK. It's very late outside, so please excuse me for the duration of this. But I am a team of one. I've been a team of one for most of my career, so it's kind of a very different experience to working in a big team. Having said that, though, I've seen companies of all of different sides getting operations wrong, getting operations right. So I'm quite passionate about, raising the profile of our profession and making sure that there is the space to talk about the things that plague us in our day-to-day. What can I say about myself? I'm no VP and I'm no co-founder, but I've throughout my career I've specialized in kind of setting up things from scratch. So I'm coming to it from a unique perspective of how does it work when there's nothing else set up in the company.
I'm super excited to have you here. And just from our initial conversations, I know you've got a ton of value to offer here today. So I'm excited for everyone to get a take. And finally, Matt, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Matt Curl. I work for Checker. So Checker is a tech unicorn on its path to becoming a decacorn. We've been working within sales ops and RevOps for a long time. Cut my teeth originally in analytics and then moved over. Checker's leading provider of background check software and services across the whole US and moving internationally. Really excited to be here. Happy to chat about all things RevOps.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Matt, why don't we actually continue with you? So I think as a good kind of warm up, one of the things that we noticed when we spoke is RevOps is a really loaded term. It means different things to different people and organizations. And I think part of that stems from the diverse range of activities that RevOps can encompass. But to our point today, I think part also stems from the varying perceptions that people have of RevOps as either being kind of a strategic function or being quite tactical or something in between. What's your definition of RevOps? Kind of how would you explain this role or this function?
Yeah, it's a good question. For me, and I think your point is right that it can be loaded. I've talked to a lot of companies where RevOps is just sales ops. I've talked to companies where it's much broader. Checker, it's much broader, and that's generally been my history with it as well. For me, I think about really RevOps as three primary functions that come together. So it's the systems that power your whole go-to-market. So the whole tech stack, Marketo, Salesforce, whatever you're using, Pardot, HubSpot, doesn't matter. It's the systems that power that. The analytics that power all of your teams, right? If you think about anything like customer health score all the way down to what is rep ramp, it's all the analytics that power that. And then what I would consider core operations, so sales ops, customer success ops, marketing ops, if you have partnerships team, partner ops. But I think those are the three primary pillars that I think about when I think about RevOps, are the systems, the analytics, and then the core operations functions. In terms of what I think the key responsibilities are, it's like source of truth. You've got to be the source of truth for the company. You've got to be arbiter of what's really happening. I think you're there to make sure that you're not so focused on just the short term, but you're figuring out the strategy, the growth plan. Are you on pace? Are you off pace? Understanding why things are happening, like what's the reason you're missing. Also, if you're overachieving, why are you overachieving? I think that's equally dangerous to not understand why you're overachieving. And then really it's to be a core business partner. I think it's the primary stakeholder that really runs the processes and the systems that go-to-market operates on. So I think about that when I think about RevOps, but again, have heard lots of different definitions from many different places, but that would be my definition there.
Perfect, thanks. And Siva, how would you define RevOps?
I think fundamentally, obviously, RevOps has been in prominence over the last 4 or 5 years. Before that, there was BizOps and then Sales Ops, and then now obviously, all of this put together with RevOps. But I think if you see, in my opinion, the reason for RevOps, the rise of RevOps has been also because today two things are happening. One, every function in go-to-market, whether it's sales, marketing, customer success, everything is highly data-driven. And so therefore, you want to have someone who is trying to put all of this together in some sense. And the second part, obviously, is with the whole recurring revenue model of business and the customer first kind of businesses coming up, it's very hard to differentiate where marketing ends, where sales starts, and where sales ends, and where customer success starts. You have all of these functions, really focusing on their specific goals, but you need this unifying function, which is looking at the entire organization's revenue goal and really orchestrating the entire process, the analytics, the tools to support and drive that growth for the company. So I think revenue operations is, really playing that role, kind of getting all of the different revenue functions together, understanding what's working well, what's not working well, and really help the company hit its revenue goal at the end of the day.
Perfect. Anastasia, anything you would add to that?
I completely agree with both Steve and Matt. I think they've raised some good points. I think if I try to summarize, RevOps for me is that strategic partner that, your go-to advisor within the business. And I think RevOps performs best when it's allowed a degree of impartiality and degree of objectivity, because that's where we come to shine, right? That's when we can go in and say, this is the black and white of what's going on. This is what our strategy should be, and this is how we move forward. I like a metaphor, so here goes. So I think if you're thinking about it in terms of sort of going on an expedition, RevOps is the person who helps you decide where you're going. RevOps is the person who collects your gear and makes sure you're not, trekking in your flip-flops. But also RevOps is that person who follows along with you on the journey and makes sure, your wheels don't fall off or, you don't collapse in the middle. So it's your go-to, it's your strategic partner. And I guess everything that we're talking about today is making sure that you can perform as a strategic partner, right? So what a great segue for you there, Natalie.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you, guys. And so I think just noticing that we want to kind of address the agenda for the day. There's kind of two main things that we're going to be spending our time talking about today. What are some of the current challenges that RevOps faces and kind of what holds RevOps back at times from being able to fulfill its ultimate potential? And then we want to get really actionable around what are the ways that you all have found, either from positive experiences or kind of hindsight being 2020, to enable RevOps to move from kind of these more reactive to more proactive and strategic roles. So that's the agenda. And I think now that you guys have defined, beautifully defined RevOps, it sounds like RevOps are essentially the superheroes of any go-to-market teams, force multipliers, mountain movers. And yet we know that RevOps practitioners face real challenges in their ability to drive kind of the ultimate intended impact. So I guess starting off with Steva, can you share a bit about what those challenges are, kind of where the limitations stem from in your experience?
For sure, Natalie. And I think you described it right. Like, the perception with the first introduction is now RevOps is the superhero, right? But, essentially, let's talk about the hero coming into the limelight. And so if you take a sales professional, they close a big deal, they get into the limelight, right? So something positive that happens. But typically, ops professional come into the limelight if something breaks. Right? If everything's going well, nobody cares because that's how it's intended to be. And it's only when things break, something's not working. Typically the ops is pulled in. Hey, what's happening? And so what you see is RevOps professionals constantly in the firefight mode, and that's also specific in companies today, especially which are chasing aggressive growth targets. Essentially, you don't have all of the processes, all of the systems, as well as everything built before the company's ambition takes off. Right, the ambition takes off before, and then here you are trying to build all of it while you are still scaling super rapidly. So
I think, sorry to interrupt you, Steva, but I heard a nice phrase recently, and it's really stuck with me the last couple of weeks. Is this idea of building the plane while flying it, and that idea and kind of speaks to what you just said. Sorry, go ahead.
Absolutely. You hit it right on the head. So essentially, that's really what's happening with RevOps today, right? There's a lot of different things thrown at RevOps. Obviously, as we've all described, RevOps has a lot of strategic insight, overall the macro picture as well as the ground reality from having worked with all of these different teams. But just to get to all of that takes so much time, and therefore ops teams are just caught up in a lot of this transactional and recurring busy work. If I were to talk about the Eisenhower matrix, the urgent important matrix, there's always, if you ask any RevOps professional, they have these important items, strategic items that they want to pick up, but there's these tactical things that keep coming in every day, and they're overloaded, and ultimately those important things become urgent and important until you even are able to pick up, and then by the time you pick up, you have so limited time that you're not able to fully give it the focus and time required to actually make it needle moving. So I think that's really fundamentally what's happening today with a lot of RevOps.
Yeah, thanks. Anastasia, you also kind of talked about this idea of timing can be a big part of kind of what makes it challenging for RevOps to perform. What's your take on this?
Yeah, so I think the biggest issue for me, the biggest issue that I've seen in my career is that RevOps gets brought into the conversation too late. So I see businesses that hire RevOps teams too late, or their first RevOps hire is like years down the line from when they should have brought them in. I've seen situations in my own career where we don't get a seat at the decision-making table and we get told decisions too late down the line. So it's kind of that, self-perpetuating cycle of, nobody hears what I do, nobody knows what I do. So therefore, when it comes to decisions being made, nobody invites me into the room. I do think it's a symptom though, rather than the cause. I think the cause would be just, businesses not really understanding what RevOps is, and this is why we're all here shouting about it today. But yeah, I think the timing of things perpetuated by people not understanding what it is that you do is a big issue.
Yeah. Matt, anything else you notice as being kind of a common theme? What makes it hard for RevOps to thrive?
Probably two. The first one is companies I advise that tend to be earlier on in their journey. I think there's like the cultural challenges they have to overcome. Depends again on your definition of RevOps, but if you tend to stick it underneath like a head of sales, for example, and you're an earlier stage company, I think there's cultural challenges you have to overcome. Your roadmap will get focused on sales and only sales, and I think that prevents a lot of the other things like source of truth, single view of customer, that are actually going to drive probably the foundation you want for actual scale. So I think that's probably the biggest one. I think it's similar to what Anastasia said about getting the seat at the table and having that. I think you have to earn that to a certain extent, and it's hard. But you also have to be in an environment that welcomes that and wants that sort of that push there. For me, I think kind of through my lens at Checker today, it's really thinking about two different phases companies kind of go through. There's the first phase you can be in where like you're not hitting goals, you're maybe not hitting what you want to do. And that's really where you need to turn yourself into more of an innovation team, and you have to pivot because what you're doing right now is not going to work. And pushing harder into it, yelling at your AEs, SDRs to get more dials, hammering your customer success folks about, they didn't run this QBR correctly. That's not going to fix it. And I think that's where you have to be the strategic advisor, and you have to focus on insights and finding that. The inverse is, when you have a path that you're proven on, you have to be operationally excellent. Lots of companies I advise, and even saw symptoms of this when I first came to Checker, show me that you're operating as designed. Like, show me that if you're saying this is how you're going to run the process as a customer success leader or a sales leader or, whatever team, a marketing leader, a campaign manager, show me that you actually do this consistently and you operate a consistent process. Specifically in startups, I think they tend to be immature and skip these steps, and that causes huge blunders along the way. And I think they lose a lot of time. So for me, I think that's always my big challenge, is thinking about what phase are we in right now? Do we have a clear path to growth? Can we grow 40, 50, 60% next year based on what we're doing right now? If so, push hard into OpEx. If we don't think we can, I need to start pivoting resources and carving out, because although I can help the team today and do a bunch of tactical things, we're gonna have a problem tomorrow. And I think one of the nature of a role like RevOps, you have a little bit more breathing room to be able to pull out. You're not so focused on the quota and so focused on hitting the number today. You can see further ahead. And that's definitely, I think, about my core challenge is like, which phase are we in and where do I want to place resources?
That's super helpful. And Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Natalie, just to jump in on something that Matt said there. So you touched upon where sales, RevOps, there I go, where RevOps sits within the org. And I think that's such an important point as well, because again, going back to being impartial and being that objective advisor, if your RevOps team reports to sales, they will not be objective about sales. And it's something that, I'm so passionate about this. You cannot keep to account people that you're reporting to, right? So I guess that's another issue. The issue with understanding where RevOps should sit, and with, having that little chat with your CSO and telling them that probably the people who report on your activity shouldn't report into you. So yeah, it's all part of that education process, isn't it? Of raising our own profile.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. Strongly agree. Yeah.
That's a really good point. I love that. And I was also just struck, Matt, by what you had said around this idea of, if something's not working, is it because the process design isn't good, or is it because it's not being followed? And how can you kind of detect which of those realities is actually at play in order to make the right moves and make the right calls? So, part of what we're talking about is what's held you back from being successful. And I think this is a good place to reflect and share some of your experiences of, let's say, initiatives gone wrong, or initiatives that never got off the ground because you weren't able to execute. And so I want to ask the panel here, was there ever a time that you felt strongly about the need for your team to take a certain action, but you couldn't make it happen? It would be great if you could kind of share with us the situation, what was going on, what was your solution, what prevented you from actually being able to act on it? And if there's any learnings or takeaways from that experiences, anything you might have done differently in hindsight that you think would have kind of achieved a more successful outcome. Siva, can we start with you?
Sure. I think back at Freshworks, I think this was obviously a bunch of different actions that we were trying to take, or initiatives. And then there's always, obviously, with the rapid growth, the company was pretty much doubling every year in its revenue. So it was almost a different company every new year, right? So, and obviously, early on, there were some things that worked from a process standpoint, from tools standpoint, but which couldn't scale after a point in time. So one of the things that we wanted to work on, for example, was on actually just the incentive program at Freshworks. So, all of the different, from account executives to SDRs to customer success, how do we want to define this entire program for the new year, right? And typically, obviously, what happens is, you go through your revenue planning exercise, then you go through the quota planning exercise, and then territories, and then you set up your commission plans, right? So we wanted to do this for the new year, and we were budgeting some time for it. But ultimately, what ended up happening was back and forth on alignment on the revenue goals. There was just multiple different processes that we had to get through before we even got to the actual meat of things. And by the time we got there, it was almost too late. It was already January, and we were almost going to get to the first month of commissions. And by the time we said, hey, what, let's just continue with what's been working, and let's just do that, right? And we knew that it's going to break, and it did in the next quarter. Basically, there was frustration, there was multiple different things that were happening. So we knew that this was going to be a problem. We knew that we had to change, but what ended up happening was, we just couldn't spare the time to be able to do that with all of the other issues going in. I think that's one of the points at which we realized that we truly need to make sure we put our foot down and say, hey, ultimately this is all going to impact the company at some point. So I think at that point probably we just missed being very specific and clear about the need for doing this initiative. Probably that's the learning that I take out of that incident, at least. But and this is not just with this particular example. There's just multiple different initiatives like this that you knew that it was going to hit you at some point. You were trying to go for it, but ultimately didn't have the time to get to it.
It's a super painful story. Like you're watching the train wreck happening. You know it's going to happen. Anastasia, have you kind of had to sit on the sidelines while train wrecks happened?
Yeah, gosh, you're digging into some trauma here, Natalie. I mean, even listening to Siva was traumatized for you. Like that's so that is such a massive issue as well with RevOps, isn't it? Like, firstly coming into like not being able to prioritize all those kind of things. Mine was a unique challenge. It was, so at Iris Software Group, we had 12 different CRMs due to the way, I know, due to the way that the group grew and acquired new companies, they kind of bolted on each new product to the existing teams rather than integrating them. So when it came to, breaking some of the silo divisions and, going as sort of a leaner one team, one dream kind of scenario, the operational team was tasked with creating a single view of the customer from across 12 different CRMs with 12 different types of data points, 12 different inputs, things like that. It was great fun. Not really. In retrospect, it was great fun, but at the time, no. So, the issue was that we weren't there when the decision was made. So we were told about what's happening. We were told it was to be done within 3 weeks. At this point, we should have started crying, but I think we were running on just pure steam at this point. But yeah, so the decision was made. We weren't there to advise on exactly how many ways this could go wrong in 3 weeks. We weren't there to advise on how quickly we can actually turn it around. We just weren't there. We just were not in the room, and that was the meat of the problem. But I think beyond all of this sort of self-pitying, I wasn't there to help thing. The mistake we made is we were not forthcoming enough. We were not brave enough, and we were not forceful enough to say, this ain't happening, and I think, there's a degree of vulnerability as well that comes with, like, on a really personal level, you have to allow yourself to be vulnerable and tell your boss, like, you're not going to deliver this, and you just go and tell the higher ups that it's not happening and this is why. And I think we didn't allow ourselves that. We focused on what we had to deliver within the time frame, rather than focusing on what would be the best possible outcome. And the best possible outcome would have been to push back on timeframes. We didn't do that. We delivered something. It was a minimal viable product. It still haunts me to this day, the issues we had, and like everything blew up around us whilst we were publishing it. But, we got there in the end with a load of changes, but I'm just thinking back to it, and I feel sorry for us. If we only had more time, we could have got something a lot better in a lot shorter a time.
Sounds like you definitely cut your teeth on that experience. Matt, I won't put you on the spot, but anything you want to add in terms of missed opportunities or horror stories of initiatives gone wrong?
Oh, I mean, so many, of course, like you learn along the way. I think, you always get beat up in your career, and I think I say you learn. I think that's like a healthy thing. I guess probably I'll just think about kind of two meta themes, because I think there's so many examples that come to mind. But the meta themes I've typically seen are probably two. So the first one is the caliber of people you hire. You cannot hire people that don't understand sales or marketing or customer success and have them be successful interfacing with stakeholders. Like it doesn't do you any good. You really have to understand how go-to-market works at a senior level to actually have a seat at the table. So I think that's kind of the first one. And so, definitely have stories about doing that, or, switching people from, a marketing side and putting them into customer success. And that doesn't work out always so well. They're just very, very different. And so you have to kind of run that balance as you're building teams between giving people experience and new exposure, but also not setting them up to fail. So I think definitely reflection on my own leadership style over time and how I've thought about that. The second one is probably a very common pattern that I see, and something I had to fight through probably earlier in career, which is you just let your team's roadmap get constantly blown up. So it's very common that you see a RevOps team and, you actually dig in a little bit and you're like, what do they really do? And it's like, well, they just do whatever all the other cross-functional stakeholders are doing. And there's not really a RevOps identity, or there's not really a RevOps project list. And I think that also is not helpful or healthy. And so definitely early in my career kind of fell into that trap where, my resources were basically pilfered and pillaged by the VP of marketing or the VP sales. It ends up over time, like the VP sales, VP marketing is super pumped. I mean, they're the happiest people ever and the biggest supporters. But if you step back and look at actually what's been done, the quality of the work, it's like, is the 7th revision of commissions really going to do anything for the business? No, probably not. So I think it's that fine balance there between partnership and stakeholder management, and then also when you need to prioritize initiatives that are actually going to drive the business. Those are tricky balances to strike, but I think those are the two probably painful lessons along the way I've had to learn. So I don't think I'm perfect, but it's definitely on those two axes. I think that there's some art that you have to kind of figure out.
I feel the need to defend VP sales everywhere. But I can say, I think this idea of how can both of these kind of stakeholders or both of these functions work together, thinking proactively rather than just kind of flying by the seat of their pants. I think that's kind of a truth that needs to exist and needs to become more embedded in the way that these teams are able to succeed and plan and kind of do resource planning and all of that. And kind of on that note, I wanted to ask, a lot of these are great learnings. I think each of you pulled out some important kind of takeaways from those experiences, what you had to learn the hard way, essentially, and how you applied those to future scenarios. I want to continue to offer our audience here a lot of actionable advice about how we transition RevOps from more reactive to more proactive, strategic, preventative, kind of the forethought of where the go-to-market teams can go. And thinking about this theme of resources, I want to ask, how do you make a business case to show either the actual or the planned impact of certain RevOps initiatives, or how do you advocate for additional resources or headcount? And Anastasia, I want to start with you here.
Sure. So I feel quite strongly about the topic. I feel quite strongly about most things, but this is one of the things that really is on my mind a lot. I hear this rhetoric a lot of, we are not doing X well enough, so let's bring in more people. And more people will not solve the issues that we have in RevOps. Most certainly, in most situations, they won't. I think what I would do before I even started on this journey of advocating for, headcount or more resources is I always like to have a look really critically at what I do day to day. And it's just as simple as, for a week, keep a diary of everything that you've had to do. And then at the end of the week, have a look at what you actually spend your time on. I think you'll find that you do a lot of stuff that's unnecessary, so that can be binned. You do a lot of stuff that can be done with automation. So like if you do any manual input and reports, bin that off as well. And, there's a lot of stuff that can be fixed just by drawing up some clearer boundaries with your colleagues with the VP of sales, for example. Some clear boundaries are definitely needed. But yeah, so it's just doing those little things before you even consider bringing someone on board, because reactive work, it's a bit like a cold sore. So you just give it to someone else. It doesn't go away. You both have it now. And certainly, like, if you bring on another person and you infect them with the same reactive, horrible day-to-day that you've been experiencing, you've set someone else up for failure, and you're not creating that, strategic, forward-thinking team. To step away from cold sores and viral diseases, if you do decide that, you do need more headcount, you do need other tools, I always like to keep in mind my stakeholders' perspective. So if I'm going to my boss and I'm saying I need more people, I'm not going to hit them with the ROI straight away. I'm not hitting them with the business impact. I'm thinking about how me having a bigger team will impact their world. So step into your stakeholder shoes for a second. Decision making is still very emotional, so you need to think about it from their perspective and kind of try and position it in a way that will make sense in their world.
Super helpful. So both kind of do the analysis first, see what's really needed, take a critical look at it, but then also once you have done that soul searching and you have a clear kind of truth with yourself that you actually do need more resources, then how you actually kind of get buy-in from those around you, appealing to their emotions. I think that's really important. Matt, how about you? What are your thoughts on kind of building the business case or advocating for RevOps?
Yeah, I think depends on the function, depends on the stage of the company. Later stage companies, I think more ratio driven. There's lots of benchmarks out there for typical ratios of enablement, ops, et cetera. So I think that's probably less helpful for this group. Let's talk function by function. Let's talk sales ops. If you got 10 sellers and you don't have a sales ops person, I will bet my life if you hire the right analyst, they will make them all 10% more efficient. And so that's a very simple rubric to think about. Like, at what point do you have enough people to where a smart analyst or a smart systems person can really push the needle and make them that much more efficient? Like, I don't think that's a hard gap to cross, to think about one person making everybody 10% better. That obviously doesn't work into perpetuity. So there's a point where you get diminishing return. But I think if you're starting and you don't really have people, that's a simple rubric. The other, same on customer success, right? How many customers are you losing? What's your churn? How much churn do you actually have to deflect to make up that gap? And do you feel like that warrants a resource? I think business cases are actually super easy on the revenue side. It's harder on product. Like, what's this product going to deliver? I don't know. We haven't built this before. That's a little bit harder. I feel like with revenue, this should be straightforward. So I think about those as two kind of simple layup ways to think about it if you're earlier stage. I think that mid-stage point, if you're really fighting for resources, this is where I hire the best people. I hire really talented people, sometimes that are in environments that their company just doesn't believe in ops and doesn't believe in like what it can do. And then hire those people. And it's crazy, like almost always like clockwork, 4 or 5 months later, their companies come back and try to like throw way more money to pull them back in. And I think that that's hard culturally. And I think I see this a lot. I see this. So I think it's an interesting question for everybody to reflect on, right? Is, do you have a really accurate understanding of how much these folks are doing? I've seen many environments where the RevOps team or even just the Salesforce administrator, if it's early stage and that's all they have, are literally working 80, 90 hour weeks, not joking, and working weekends and every holiday to keep things running. That's just unsustainable. And you're going to lose those people. So I think about that as well. If you're in an environment where you're working that many hours and you can't get funded, you need to communicate what's going on. You need to be very clear about the environment you're in. You need to be very clear about like the challenges you're facing and why. Probably as an individual, you should seek mentorship to try to get help and make sure that your messaging is clean to the executive layer. I think if you've got outside counsel, you feel like your messaging is clean to the executive layer and they're not responding to that. I think this is ultimately like a circular question for yourself of like, is this an environment you want to be in? And I think that's generally what I see and how I think about it. But on business case, tie it to revenue. You're in RevOps. Like, you have literally direct line to dollars. Prove it.
That's a great one. Siva, what's your take on this?
I think, completely agree with, what's been already said. But I think probably one other thing that I'd add is, just make your revenue functions truly your partners, right? The sales leaders, the marketing leaders, the customer success leaders, make them your partners and talk about, what you want to do as initiatives to support their goals. At the end of the day, they have their own goals. And that's tied to somewhere in some sense your goal and the organization's goal as well. So make them truly your partners. And what happens is, when you're making the case, the leaders of these functions also support you and help you actually bring it on board, right? So at the end of the day, there's the sales leader, the marketing leader who's also advocating alongside you, and so that just makes your case much more easier. But obviously, as Matt said, you just have so much direct line to the numbers. So put all of that numbers together, but ultimately also have partners who are supporting you in your ask. And so that just makes it easier for the executives to, make sure it's on board.
Yep. There's more to say about this, but I also want to incorporate, we got some great questions from people in the audience. And so, Matt, you talked a little bit about hiring and recruiting for great RevOps talent. One of the questions that we got was, what are the important skills that RevOps need to acquire to move to a strategic role?
Yeah, I look to move into a strategic role. Like, I'll kind of give background even on myself. I was a VP of sales for 4 years. So I carried a bag. I moved from sales ops. We had a VP of sales that moved on, and I got tasked in for 3 months, but 3 months turned into 4 years, and I built and scaled that team. You've got to learn how to do that at the strategy layer. Like, you have to understand how sales works, what market you're penetrating, how you're going after it. Like, what are the other options on the table? So some of this is like time and experience. I think it's putting yourself in a really good environment where you have exposure to really smart people. When you are in a nature of RevOps where you are becoming an order taker, you need to stop. Even if you're taking orders and doing the work, that's okay, but you need to stop and understand why. So a really common thing that's non-technical, but it's a skill that I really push on my people, tell me why you're doing this thing. Like, do you understand why? Like, why are you loading this lead list? Why are you doing, like, why? What is the purpose? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? If you actually go do that, you'd be amazed how many times you'll find like your admins or other things just don't know. They're like, I'm not sure why I'm doing this. And it's like, that's a missed opportunity. That's a coaching opportunity to help expand someone and get them to understand what the strategy is. Like, okay, we're doing this because we have this campaign we're running and we're doing this thing and this is why we're doing it. So that's the strategic lens you got to develop over time. And that's just time and seat, curiosity, innate inquisitiveness. On the technical side, you're going to have to push one of the three probably. And I think this is what's kind of needed to move up those ranks and be super successful. Either you've got to be really strong within a system. So you have to know how to be a Salesforce administrator or Marketo admin. You've got to get in there and learn how to, work on declarative. You can go more technical. You can figure out how to write JavaScript, but that's not necessary. But you might want to go that path. I didn't go that path. I came up through the school of like analytics and analysis. The other side is you go become really strong in SQL. You become really strong in like analyzing data, understanding data patterns, figuring out what the data is telling you, and like getting very good at that. That's another kind of technical skill you can develop and push towards that direction. The third is what I would call like core operations, which a lot of people do come up through like the typical sales ops lens. That's light on analysis, lighter on systems, but really strong on like process and people. Like, why are processes designed the way they are? How many cadences, how many steps should a cadence be? Like, why do you know that's working? A/B testing those things through out of the box software. What's good commission design? What's bad commission design? Those are more like core in that ops pillar. Got to develop one of those three. I think it's hard to be expert on all three of those. I normally don't see that. You tend to see people slant into one of those three categories, but you got to come up one of those chains. And then on the strategy side, like I said, you got to know how sales works or marketing or customer success. And ideally, by the time you're 10, 15 years in your career, you've spent time with all of them, deep time with all of them. And you really understand how to cobble together a go-to-market machine.
Wow. What a thorough answer. Fantastic. Another great question that we got, and Anastasia, I'd love to hear your take on this. Someone asked, how can RevOps efficiently work or maybe help companies that work with siloed data? You've spoken about kind of data that's been dispersed across a lot of different CRM systems, but these silos of data and information, they can take a lot of different forms.
Gosh, yeah, that was that. I promise that wasn't me asking me a question. I didn't set myself up, but that's a really difficult one. I think the biggest challenge in RevOps is making sure that you don't have siloed data, and certainly from my experience, it just doesn't work because you've got sales, analysts telling you one thing, you've got people in customer success telling you another thing about their metrics. It just doesn't function. There are some things that, it would make sense to keep in particular teams. For example, if you're talking about like NPS scores, that makes sense for the customer success team to hold, for example, right? How do you work with siloed data? I don't. I've been as a team of one. I've been quite sort of land grabby whenever I've joined an organization. I've said, listen, this is my bag now. I will be your partner. I will report on this. Please don't touch it. But yeah, I think the only thing you can do really is to make sure that you understand what data exists in other silos. How does the other silo work it? So for example, if your customer success team holds data on, for example, lifetime value of the customer, things like that, you need to understand how it's calculated, and you need to make sure that across the two silos, everyone agrees that that is the right thing to do. Ultimately, like if it's a deep cultural silo and it will never be broken, all you can do is make sure that you know what's happening and you have oversight on everything. And the other thing that's really helped as well, so where you need to put together a report, for example, that needs to come from all different directions, and it's a summary of all the siloed data, I guess you got to know how to work with your stakeholders. You need to set out all of the rules of engagement. You need to know when certain data points can come up, what kind of issues there'll be with them. So yeah, it's a tricky one. It's a lot of management. This is exactly why I don't do it, because I don't like I don't like all this messing about. But yeah, it's tricky.
Thanks for that. But ultimately, you're a big believer in needing to break the silo. at all
Yes.
costs, it sounds like.
Break the chains and the silos. That's me.
Okay. We got another great question. Siva, I'd love to get your take on this one. And I might butcher it just a little bit, but the question asked was this: where does RevOps fall under the MOP umbrella? I'm wondering if MOP means marketing ops or something else. So if you ask the question, feel free to clarify it for us. But the question is, and how can this interaction how can this interaction be successful in creating a strategic plan? Yep. So marketing operations, we believe, is the question.
Sure. So I think, yeah, so this is actually one of the common questions that I've seen some of the other professionals also ask. And that's because typically sales operations evolves into revenue operations in most organizations. And sales operations is fairly familiar with customer success operations, but somehow marketing operations is this area that a lot of sales professionals or sales operations professionals tend to not have a skill set, right? Because of some of the things that are required on specifically on the systems front that I see that acts as a challenge for a lot of folks. So I think obviously, like everything else, it's just getting familiar with the systems associated with marketing. And marketing operations can just get a little also very analytical. So in fact, just going back to one of Matt's points on how do you become strategic, he mentioned 3 points, which is either your operations or analytical or systems heavy. Typically, it's 1 or 2, not all the 3. But I specifically would lay emphasis on the analytics part, right? So because generally what happens when you're strong in analytics is you typically get feet in the conversation. For there's some meeting that's happening and you just get pulled in because you have some insight out of crunching the data, and so you just get into the table to just present your view, and that's the first entry point for RevOps person to be strategic. And so coming back to this question on marketing operations rolling up into RevOps, it also starts there. If you can start to crunch some numbers and get some insight of what's happening on the marketing campaigns, of attribution, just something that, it might not be right, but at least is one step ahead in terms of understanding the data points, that just gets it easier for you to roll marketing operations under the revenue operation umbrella.
Thanks. Matt, I saw you were kind of passionately nodding your head as Siva was speaking. Anything you wanted to add there?
No, I mean, it's like super strong point about analysts getting pulled into the room. I think that's like super dead on. Like if you can synthesize what the information means, you're going to get pulled in commonly. So I think that's like a really strong point there of like synthesis and understanding. So I agree with him like very much there. I was like jogging my memory of like, you're right. Like that is the common personality type that gets pulled in.
We are coming up on time here, and I am so grateful for the 3 of you for weighing in. I think you have very unique perspectives and certainly no shortage of battle scars that qualify you to share in this conversation and really give some actionable advice. As we wrap up here, I want to kind of circle back to each of you, and what would you hope are the main takeaways? If you have to give kind of 2 takeaways that you hope people walk away with from this conversation about how to become more strategic RevOps leaders or RevOps practitioners, what would you offer them? And you can feel free to jump in, whoever's kind of ready with their thoughts.
I'll kick us off. So I guess number 1, from everything that I've said and everything that the guys said as well, I would go for making yourself known, making yourself understood, and making yourself liked within a business. So I would say to anyone listening, go and meet your team, but go and really meet them. So don't talk about your dog, don't talk about the weather. Go and talk about what you do, what's on your plate, what your key priorities are, and set some boundaries, set some SLAs with the teams that you work with, so with your colleagues. More importantly, though, whilst that's great because it raises your sort of professional brand, I guess, and your profile within the business. But more importantly, if you bring in another person to work under you or with you, on their onboarding agenda needs to be the same kind of introductions tour. So that person needs to go around, make themselves heard, understood, and known to the rest of the business, and really win some hearts and minds early on. Number two for me, just what I said earlier, just go and make notes on what you do every day, and then be really ruthless about it. Go through it. We often talk about revenue operations is that team that puts revenue as the North Star for the rest of the go-to-market teams, and we do all this great stuff about aligning, but our North Star as the RevOps team should be strategic impact. And we know what our goals are. We don't go into, as operations people, we tend to be fairly well organized, and we don't go into things blindly swinging. So anything that doesn't align within your day with that North Star of strategic impact needs to go. And you need to be quite cruel with yourself about it as well.
Well said. Siva, give us your hot take.
I think I'll probably summarize some of the points that I had already mentioned in this conversation. I think the first part is to really make sure, as RevOps, you are truly an ally to each of the revenue functions. Make the entire function your ally, the leadership your ally, so that they start advocating for you and really, partner with you to achieve the goals, right? Like, so you're not adversaries at any point. And so for you to do that, you have to really understand their business, their pain points. You can't just say, hey, you know what, the win rate is falling quarter on quarter. You need to understand what's really happening on that win rate. Why is the conversion rate low? Or whatever different metric that you're analyzing on, really understanding the ultimate crux of it. Because at the end of the day, you can do the analysis, but unless you have the ground insight, and you combine that together, you're not yet powerful as a RevOps professional. So I think that's super important. Obviously, a sub point to that is you need to be somewhere at least a little bit strong in analytics, because that really, as you said before, gets your seat in the table. So, but if you can combine the strong analytics job with context on the ground and really layer it out, you just become super powerful as a RevOps professional. So I think that's one broad thought. And the second broad one is, as Anastasia mentioned before, anything that's on your plate, where there's tactical stuff, where there's recurring busy work, pull all of that that's really consuming a lot of your time on a monthly basis, and see how much that you can automate. There's no point just hiring for the sake of hiring and just dumping people on the problem. Try and see, there's enough solutions today in the market for a lot of different problems that revenue operations professionals face. So look at automating as much as you can, so that you truly then start to focus on the strategic items on your plate.
Excellent. Thank you. And Matt, wrap us up here.
Yeah, just go be strategic. That's it. That's all you gotta do. Yeah, I think I agree with, a lot of what we talked about, but yes, like, I think you have to have the business partnership, and, you got to be well respected. If you're not respected, like, you don't have a seat at the table, period. So I think part of that, though, is, if the sales team misses, if the customer success team misses, if marketing misses, do you feel like that's a miss on you? If you don't feel like that's a miss on you, you're not a partner. So I think you got to feel that pain. Like, for me personally, if we miss on any of the goals, I take it super personally. My OKRs always include the company goals on revenue for all the teams. Like, that is on me to make sure that we hit. Like, and I think you've got to view it that way. Like, you are a core reason you're going to hit or miss. So that's one. And then the second part, I think, touches on what we talked about, but again, it's the sickness I tend to see, which is people end up in purely reactive states. When you're purely reactive, you're not going to be strategic. Super easy, right? To think about why. One, are you not bringing initiatives to the table, right? If you're not bringing initiatives to the table, how are you being strategic? So maybe you're saying, that's not me. I am bringing initiatives to the table. Okay. So my next question would be like, why can't you convince others that your initiatives are important? Maybe you suck at communicating. Maybe you don't make like a good business case. Like, you got to figure that out. Like, why do they not do that? And maybe you think that, like, okay, I have brought initiatives to the table. They are really good. They're well-funded. They're amazing. Have someone out from the outside confirm that. And if they are, maybe you're in a bad culture, and maybe that's something you should look at. But I would think about that. Don't let yourself be in reactive. Generally what I see is people in reactive state, and then I ask them like what initiatives they're fighting for, and it's like crickets. So you want to be strategic, you should have an opinion on what's best for the business. You should have an opinion about what the business should be doing. You should be very opinionated about what sales or marketing or customer success should be doing differently. And if you're not bringing that forward, you're not going to be strategic. You're just someone in the room to help do work. That's not going to put you there.
Incredible. Thank you all so very much. I'm blown away by some of the points that you were able to share, and I thank you so very much. And we have some links in the chat as well if people want to follow up with each of you later. So if you heard something from Anastasia, Siva, Matt, you want to reach out to them or follow them and kind of be able to absorb more of their wisdom, definitely connect with them on LinkedIn. Thank you all.
Thanks for having us.
It was really amazing. We are going to wrap things up here, but first, in name of the MSP team, I want to say thank you to everyone who attended this session, and especially thank you to our wonderful panelists. That was really incredible. I had some ideas for shirts designs with some phrases that you said today, and I learned a lot. And while the panelists and I hang out backstage, our MS team...
His acceptance speech got cut off.
Sorry? Am I back? Yeah.
Yep,
Okay.
you're back.
So while me and the panelists hang out backstage, our MSP team will make sure the recording is available on our website shortly, so you can have access to this amazing information. And once you're there, you can go ahead and check our future events. Thank you again, Everstage, for sponsoring this. And panelists, let's go backstage to hang out.